Hey, good morning. Chuck here with Apple Drains. I'd like for you to meet Jeremy and Meg. I recently did a live help consultation for these guys. They bought a property in New Mexico and turning it into an Airbnb. And they have several drainage issues that they tried to address. One of them was behind the retaining wall, brand new retaining wall. And the other is right here where you see them trying to break up the old patio, because this area floods dramatically. So they need to put a catch basin in there as well as a French drain to help collect the water and then send it down over the hill. They're working on a really tight schedule, and you can see them out here at night. And you can also notice that it just snowed. Can you see the snow there? Remember, they're in New Mexico. And what their questions really were was, how do we cut this patio and break out the concrete? They need to get a catch basin right here in the corner because this area floods dramatically. I explained how the concrete saw works and how they need to be able to cut all the way through the concrete, at least 4 inches. And that's just what they did. Here's a couple clips of those guys working at night, and it's actually great to see these guys out here working. I'm just going to let it run so you can hear them and hear what they have to say.
This is heavier than it looks, and this is hard. Oh, Chuck makes this look really easy. It's smart.
One. Hit it with the concrete saw. Took a couple passes. Now I hit it with the pry bar. Got a big old chunk out.
So in this video, I'm going to go over it again, what it takes to actually cut out a section of concrete, whether it be a patio or a driveway or a sidewalk, and show you exactly how to do this. This is a very complete tutorial from cutting the concrete, breaking it out, and actually putting back the concrete and finishing the job. Let's take a look at how the concrete saw actually sets up and works. First of all, you'll notice that there's a garden hose attached to the saw. Can you see it right there? The water from the garden hose travels down this smaller hose, and what it's doing is it is keeping that saw blade cool, keeping it cold. It also helps keep the dust down. You can see the water spitting out of the shroud. I mean, this thing really puts out a lot of water, but it doesn't make a mess, which is really nice. Once you have all the water running and is fired up, power up the saw and begin to push it down into the concrete. Notice how it's pivoting on the rollers. We want to go all the way down as deep as that saw will go. It cuts 4 inches. Next, we're going to pull it back just a little ways to help start a straight line. You'll notice that there's a little gap between the shroud and the concrete. But as I run the machine back, once I get a few feet, I just push the machine right back through there, and it's cutting 4 inches deep. Now I can just slowly pull the concrete saw all the way across this patio. And that's how this machine cuts. We need to cut all the way through 4 inches in order to be able to break and pop out the concrete with the pry bar. Probably the hardest thing about using a handheld partner saw is that you have to try to keep a straight line. So if you have a guide beside the machine, it's really easy. But to do it by freehand does take a little practice in order to get a good straight cut. There are a lot of videos out there showing you how to push a pipe underneath of a patio and easily dig under, but you know what? It is much easier and faster to rent a saw if you don't have one and cut the patio, make 2 cuts, come back, use your pry bar and pop this out. I promise you that this only takes 15 or 20 minutes and you're done. On this patio, you can see it is a 3.5-inch thick pour. Remember that saw blade cuts 4 inches. As long as we have cut all the way through that concrete, we can use the pry bar and this will pop right out of there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to break this concrete out. And the secret to this was, remember when we were running the saw, if you cut clear through the concrete, you should be able to crack a piece off with just a pry bar. And the reason I use a pry bar is because it's so much easier than a sledgehammer. What you do is you just start hitting it on the same place over and over. See how quickly that cracked? Okay, now go ahead and pry that piece up and pull it out. You can see just it comes right out of there. And this is just one guy with a pry bar. The secret is to cut clear through it. He's already got the next crack. You can see it just lifts right out. We're going to haul that concrete away. We'll continue this process until we take it out. Then we'll trench across it. So again, you got it cracked up. You just pull it on out of there. And remember, that secret is to cut clear through the concrete. If you do not get through the concrete, you cannot do this. You'll have to come back and beat the heck out of it, and you will be tired after you do it. Once we have the concrete removed, you can see the path that the pipe's going to lay in, and it's going to discharge over here to a sump basin. So right over here is where we're putting our pit. You can see we're down deep enough. We're ready to go ahead and set the pit in here. We've already cut off the nipple. This is going to be the inlet line for a couple of small catch basins. We've also perforated the pit. If you can see the holes in here, we've perforated the pit all around so that the groundwater can enter the system. We'll surround this with gravel as well. We also put them on the bottom, which we didn't do yet, so we need to put them on the bottom to make sure it's not like a boat. We don't want the pit to float up as water rushes in. So just to recap, you can see here's the cut across the patio. We also cut the sidewalk because there were some flooded areas on both sides of the walk, and we're just going to crack that right out of there just like we showed you. It's all going to discharge into that sump basin, and then it's going to get pumped out and over the hill behind the house. This is a really great project, but you can see the saw cuts. It only took 15 minutes to make all those cuts and probably 10 minutes to crack the concrete and lift it out of there. This is a great project for the do-it-yourselfer. Like I said, this is a great project for the do-it-yourselfer. There is lots more to this video, but I wanted to show you how easy it is to actually use the concrete saw to cut concrete, cut sidewalks, cut patios, and actually do this job yourself. It is not hard to do to remove concrete and put pipe underneath. This is just showing you the discharge of the pump as it runs, on down the driveway and into a storm drain behind the house. Works really good. Hey, good morning. Chuck here with Apple Drains. Let's take a look at negative grade on a driveway. Do you know what that means? That means that the street is higher than the garage. And so when it rains, the water just rushes down the driveway and of course ends up in the garage. The most common solution is to run a channel drain across the front of the driveway. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the low spot of the driveway is in the center of the driveway. For example, in this long driveway, the low spot is right there by the sidewalk. You can use a level to find the low spot of the driveway. You can see here we're just putting the level on the drive, and we know that that's the low spot. Check both sides and you'll find the center of the low spot. Negative grade of the driveway sometimes can be solved with a gravity discharge. Usually it's going to run out back because that driveway is running downhill from the street towards the garage. Most of the time you're going to need a sump pump to lift that water up and send it back up the hill to the street. In the new build, these sump pumps are already inside the garage. That's where the builder actually got it right. Remember, this is a retrofit. In other words, this is after the fact, and the builder didn't get it right. It's much more cost effective to set this sump basin here on the outside, right by the garage, than it is to cut back into the floor of the garage and install it inside. But it really depends on that customer's budget. So we've talked a little bit about channel drains, and I'll show you a full install here in just a second. But there are other alternatives, and they can be very easy or they could be very hard. Depending on how your driveway is sloped, it's possible you could just put a catch basin at the low spot and the water will drain directly into that basin, and then you just need a discharge to carry it away. Okay, let's take a look at how to install these two systems and solve negative grade on the driveway. Hey, good morning. Chuck here with Apple Drains. Today we're installing a channel drain in a driveway. And you can see we've got a piece of the channel drain out here. But what happens is this driveway comes downhill into the garage, and of course it's flooding their garage. You can see the crack in the concrete. That indicates there's a lot of water underneath of here. Also, the slab of the garage floor has been cracked. So what we're going to do is to cut the driveway 2 times, about a foot wide, and remove the concrete. We're also going to attach a couple of downspouts. All of this will drain over to a sump basin and lift it up and send it back out to the street. Remember, this is negative grade that we're solving on a driveway. That pump's going to lift the water up and send it back out to the street. So right there in the corner, right beside Gerald there, we're going to put a sump pit, and he's pulling up the bricks there of the brick walkway. That's where our discharge line is going to come out and go out to the street. On the other side, there's a downspout over there that Chuck's hooking up. We need to trench that line because that's going to tie into our channel drain as well. It doesn't have to be real deep. Channel drain's not deep, but we're going to let that one flow through the channel drain across the drive. We'll empty into the sump pit where you can see Gerald starting to dig. That's where we'll put the sump pump on this side of the driveway. Okay, so while these guys are digging, we're going to go ahead and perforate our pit. And we do this because we want some of the water to drain out of the pit, or vice versa. When it rains hard, we want the water to come into the pit so it doesn't float upward. This is just like a boat. So just a few holes. And then we perforate around the side of it. So we've got our pit down here in the ground, and now we're able to set our temporary sump pump up because there's no place for the water to go. When we run the water right here to cut this concrete, it'll just flood. So we need a place to set that sump pump up. We've got that in there, and we're just going to temporarily, you can see our sump pump with a temporary hose on it. We're just going to pump it out here to the street. We've already started that trench at the street. We're using a diamond bit on our saw, cuts right through there like butter, and notice that we have the water running because we need that water to cool the blade down. Also keeps the dust down really, really well. So while I'm cutting the driveway, I'm having the guys go ahead and finish the trench on out to the street, and that's for our discharge line from the sump pump. You'll notice I'm using the channel drain as the straight edge, and this is because some people say go ahead and snap a chalk line, but as you can see, the amount of water and dust and the mud from the saw itself, you can't see the line. It's impossible. So it's better to have some type of a straight edge through there. You'll also notice the level, which is 2 feet long, to give us a good guide and keep our line good and straight. Normally you're a little closer to the garage door, but this is the low spot of the drive, and so this is where the channel drain has to go. Okay, so we finished cutting both sides of the concrete so we can install our channel drain. Now we're going to break this out. The secret to this is just keep pounding with your pry bar until the concrete cracks. I promise you that it will crack. If you cut all the way through it, you'll be able to do this in a matter of seconds. It's really that simple. We pound just like a jackhammer, and that concrete will get weaker and weaker, and you can see the cracks, and then we'll pry those out with the pry bar, and we'll be ready to install the channel drain. Once you've finished making your cuts through the driveway, next you'll need to take the pry bar and you can break this straight out. I promise you that you don't need a jackhammer. This pry bar will break this concrete up and you can pull it right out of there. Usually we make them about 1 foot long. Concrete's heavy, so you don't want to make it too big to not be able to pick up, but you can definitely pull this out of here. Think of yourself as a human jackhammer. Basically, you're just going to keep hitting that concrete and it will get weaker and weaker and eventually crack. It really is that simple. Once you have a giant wheelbarrow full of concrete, haul that away, whether you're putting it on your property or whether you're going to haul it to the landfill. Either way. But you can see it comes right out. Pry bar, pound, and it will be out of there. This may not seem like a do-it-yourself project, but I promise you this is not that hard to do. And of course you might not have a saw, you might have to go rent the saw, you might have to buy a pry bar, but it is something that the homeowner could do themselves if they wanted to tackle the project. So remember that concrete is a very strong substance, but when you hit it with a hammer or a pry bar, many times it works just like the jackhammer. It just weakens the concrete and eventually it will crack. And the real secret here is to be able to cut clean through the concrete. So let's take a look here. So you can see if you cut clear through the concrete, we're down into the clay. You can see this is clay and not concrete. Cut clear through. When you take that pry bar, crack through it, it's just going to pop right out of there. Real simple job. So now that we've made our cut and removed the concrete, we need to clean up a little bit because this is kind of like concrete dust. Although it's wet, if you leave it on there, it's going to dry onto your old concrete. So we want to try to get as much of it up as possible before we go any farther. So now we're plumbing the discharge line. This is 1.5 inch PVC. It goes all the way out to the street, to the curb cut. Putting our couplings on. We need to glue this. Good amount of glue both sides of the coupling. Somebody push the back of that pipe for me. Got it. So let's kind of recap a little bit. Remember, the first thing that we did was we actually dug this sump pit. This is just temporary, sitting down in there, because we had to run water in order to cut this concrete. So we needed a place for that water to go. And you can see it's running through the trench right now, coming down through, goes into the pit, and the pump lifts it up and kicks it out. So we'll let this all dry out, and tomorrow we'll go ahead and install, cover up, put the concrete in, and we'll be done. Each coupling needs to be glued. Perfect. So you can see we went under the cable wires. We've got 1.5 inches going all the way to the street, and it starts back at the sump pump from the discharge. We'll show you that in just a second. Okay, so we've got our pit installed, our discharge line. Tomorrow we'll hook up the channel drain. That's what this trench is all about right here. We'll also hook up that downspout in that corner over there. And that water from the roof will come through the trench drain and come all the way over here. We're going to backfill this area right in here just so it stays put, and that's about as far as we'll get today. As you can see, our discharge line comes out. We've already covered that. 1.5 inch PVC. This is uphill coming out here to the street, and here's where we're going to discharge right here. And that pump will kick that water out. No problem at all. Should keep up with fairly heavy rains. Of course, you'll never beat Mother Nature. Here at the curb where we're discharging, we've already used the concrete saw and made a couple of cuts. Now all we do is take the pry bar, pop it loose, they lift right out. Finally, we'll just go ahead and grind it out a little bit with the pry bar just to clean out the trench. Okay, so now we're ready to set the pump permanently and permanently do the discharge. We already cut the riser. Next we're putting on the check valve. Remember that arrows point up. Use your handy dandy drill, tighten up those clamps, make sure they're good and secure. Set your pump back in the pit. Get it square where you need it. Next we're going to put on our no hub to the discharge line where we'll make our connection. Glue up your fittings. Bring a 90 up. Tighten up your no hub with your handy dandy drill. More glue, another 90. There's already a hole cut there in the pit. Now we'll just run a piece of pipe right across from one 90 to the other. Glue it up good and tight. And it's done. As a permanent discharge with a check valve, that water will run all the way out to the street. This is a very important note. Can you see where the channel drain ends? It's actually still inside the driveway. That is for aesthetics, and it looks so much better than coming all the way across the drive. So now it's time to secure your channel drain. And of course, you know you're going to put some concrete in there. And this is a really easy thing to do, but it does take quite some time. If you have a helper, wow, you can really knock this out. One guy can mix the concrete, and then you or the other guy can just put it in, trowel it out, and make the finish. Channel drain with sump pump and discharge is probably the most common way to solve the negative grade problem of the driveway. And if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you can truly save thousands. There are a lot of factors involved, you know, in putting all this together. How wide is your driveway? How thick is that concrete? You know, how much material are you going to need? The sump pump, the pit, all of these things are going to come into play when you hire a contractor, because it's going to be a lot more expensive than, you know, just the $1,500-$1,600 that you might put in it to yourself. The hardest thing about putting channel drain into the driveway is to try to get your slope, get your pitch, to get that water to run across the drive. Most of the time you're going to end up going through grade. In other words, you're going to have to make your channel drain go down through the higher part of your driveway. So here at the beginning of this line, you can see it's fairly flush, has just a little bit of fall to drop into it. But as we get further down into the other side of the driveway, it's going to have a much deeper drop into the channel drain. Not so much that your car can't drive over it, but it will be more than you think.
Okay, so we patched up the curb. You can see our discharge coming out there. Should work really good.
So you can see we've got a tremendous discharge. When that pump kicks on, that will come straight out here to the street, to the curb, flows down this curb where it belongs, down to the storm.
Hey, this is Chuck with Apple Drains, reminding you that if you believe you can do something, I guarantee you can do it. Have a great day.
Hey, good morning. Chuck here with Apple Drains. You know, a lot of times I'll come back to a job site and just double check things and make sure things are working good. We installed this channel drain here yesterday, and it rained really hard last night, a couple of inches. It looks like it's working really good. You know, debris, of course, the leaves on top of the channel drain, that's normal. But, you know, there's a sump pump that comes from the crawl space, ties into that downspout drain, and then we've got it running through our channel drain. And it's looking like it's working really, really good. Let's go out to the street and see what kind of discharge.
is Chuck with Apple Drains, reminding you that we are doing a group live help Thanksgiving Day weekend. Probably on Sunday morning, we will do a free group live help. And if you've never joined in one of these things, they're really fun because you will hear people talk about their problems. And as I answer their question, you may find that we're actually talking about your backyard. And you can see how similar things are. And you actually learn quite a bit from the group live help. So check the description box. It has all the information in it. And like I say, we're probably going to do that this Thanksgiving Day weekend, probably Sunday morning.